if you guys, oh, I'm not presenting my screen. Let me present my screen. You guys should be seeing the checkerboard when we get there. All right, you guys see my screen? Okay, cool. So today we're gonna work a little bit on improving the design a little bit, and just some finer elements of the design. And then if we have time, we're gonna start talking about JavaScript templates, or as is also called, string interpolation, which is a nice fancy word and not a bad name for a child, if you guys feel that way at some point. So one of my favorite characters,
I would pity that child.
string interpolation, Erskine.
What do you call him? String for short.
Turpy.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. But anyway, we'll get to string interpolation if we have time. But to start with, just looking at our design here. Before I forget, on the SharpTop the ACA, there are assignments posted for all the stuff you guys ought to be doing. So hopefully you guys are posting your responses to said assignments. Yes, ma'am.
Those assignments were due last week.
Well, then you should have done them and turned them in.
But they didn't pop up till today.
Well, no, they've been there. They've been there, at least since last week. But you should post your assignments to those. So what all that really needs to be is a link to your GitHub to show that you've done it, like you're moving pieces. It's not that externalized CSS, man, that's been forever. But some of them, but don't worry about getting late grades. It's not like when have I docked you guys for being late? You guys always get like 98s and 99s. Yes, ma'am.
I think I put it in GitHub, but I'm not sure.
Well, you can go to GitHub and find out very easily. Yep. All right. Any other questions or other people that I can make feel bad about the questions that they ask? All right. Yes, no, actually it is easy. In fact, when you want to share your project, you kind of have to go to GitHub. So go to GitHub, open your account, and then go to the repository and just grab the URL for that repository, and then you can paste it in to each of these. That way we can see, yep, your CSS has been externalized, remove pieces. Don't sweat it if you're, a little bit late on the project. The important thing is that you finish it, not that you sweat about.
So if I turn it in next year,
then you'll get whatever grade your mother gives you for it, because as it turns out,
will turn it in on time.
yes.
Got it for a little bit.
So, yeah. Yep. Got to remember that they are the ones that decide your grades, ultimately. All right. With that said, the Wrath of Mom, similar to the Star Trek Wrath of Khan, but different. All right. So we've got this board here, and it looks all right, but the background's kind of plain, and it's running off the screen a little bit here, okay, which I'm not a huge fan of. So I wanted to do a couple of things to make it look a little more better. All right. I don't know if you guys were there when I changed this from the black marble here to the the dark gray marble, but the dark gray marble looked better, and it worked better with the black pieces. By the way, Hope, will you grab that door if you don't mind? I've still got the black marble, and I thought,
to hold it the rest of the class.
yes, I would like for her to hold that door for the entirety of the class period.
But the hinge is already holding it for us.
Yes.
So.
Yes. All right. So I've got that black marble image, and I thought I might use that for something as well. So originally I thought, hey, what if I put this marble chessboard on a black marble table? Well, that was just a little too much, So I decided against that. But still, a stark white background. In general, stark white backgrounds are not usually a great idea. You want to go with a very, very light gray if you're going for white. But sometimes the high contrast you get when you have a really stark white background can just be kind of jarring to your eyes. So let's make a few changes to our design. So we're going to go over here into board.css. I should have named it interesting.css. I might have gotten more attention from you guys. Bum. All right, background color. Oh, heads are going down around. All right, we're going to make this, how about DDD? Let's go take a look and see what that looks like. All right, there we go. So just takes a little bit off the edge there, right? So not not a huge change, not amazing. It's not a beautiful like wood tabletop or something like that, but it's better than just a plain white background. Okay, so the other thing that I'm not a huge fan of is it's sitting over there to the left, and it's super easy to fix. Now, interestingly, because the original purpose of HTML was publishing papers, when I want to align something, I don't just say align, I say text align, right? And so in order to align my chessboard or my checkerboard, I need to use the text align attribute. And now it moves to the middle. Okay, so now we're looking a little more better. Okay, but it's still going off the bottom of the screen. And if I was to change the width of the screen, right, I end up with a very interesting checkerboard as the size changes. So I would like something that would kind of respond to the size of the board. Okay, now there is there are lots of different attributes or things you have to kind of be aware of when we think about an HTML document. But the other part of it is the HTML document is also running inside a browser, and the browser knows about itself. Okay, and so there is not just the notion of the document, because the document's the whole thing. It goes all the way down here. Okay, but there is the notion of the viewport. Okay, and the viewport is what is the browser displaying right now, and the browser is willing to tell you that, like, hey, I'm displaying this chunk. This is how wide I am. This is how tall I am, which is kind of nice. So the viewport, the document's height is going to be, from the very top of the document to the very bottom of the document. Okay, but the viewport is from, the right up here at the top of the document to, what is that? That's row 7. Yeah, to like towards the bottom of row 7. Okay, you guys got me? All right, and so there's a way that you can actually specify heights relative to that, and so we're going to actually do that today. We're going to go back over here, and I fiddled with quite a few combinations of this to get it right, but I won't bore you with all those.
You didn't play a violin?
No, I fiddled. Yeah. The devil went down to Georgia, and I went down to my CSS and did some fiddling. But I'm pumped. All right. So,
give me a heart attack from all these characters.
yeah. Devil Went Down to Georgia is an awesome song. All right, so okay, so there's our body. Yep. So here's some of the changes I made. They're on a different branch right now. Yeah, I tried changing the height of the whole board container, and that didn't fly for me. Oh, I forgot. Actually, there was a couple of other little things I wanted to change. I want to make before we get on to making it responsive. So let's grab that board container. Now, if you remember, let's go back over to our HTML and see, like, what in the world am I even talking about? If you remember, way on the outside, right inside the body tag, there is one div, and it's called board container, and it holds. If I collapse it, it holds the whole board. Hence the name, board container. Oops, let me go back over to my CSS so I can reference that. Particular element. And I'm going to give it a background image with a URL of images/black marble. Save that. Let's just see what happens. Let's go over to here. All right. So that's, again, like I said, that's a little much, right? I've got black marble all around it. But it would be kind of nice to have just like maybe like an edge around the board, rather than looking like these squares are just kind of sitting on the table individually. So, and I like that it fills in the gaps between the cells, right? So, so that's good. So we just need to constrain the size of this, and that's actually not all that difficult. Okay. In fact, let me inspect this. It'll be a little easier, I think. And
press the staples button. Oop, that was easy.
that was.
Oop, that was easy.
Oh man, give a -1 for that one. All right, so I don't have a whole lot of space here, but board container. All right, so one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to take the board container has a display of block by default. All divs have a display of block, which means they extend over the whole page, right? So I'm going to get rid of that display, and I'm going to make it inline block. Okay, if I make it inline, it just disappears altogether, right? Because but if I make it inline block, it takes up just as much space as it needs to take up. Okay, in other words, all those cells are forcing it to take up the space that it's taking up. Does that make sense? It's collapsing onto those cells. Okay, so we'll do that inline block, which is cool. That works. And guys, working in the page inspector is kind of nice sometimes because it allows you to make changes and go without having to go back and forth and save. But of course, as soon as I refresh this page, I'll have to make these changes again. So I'll copy these off and go put them where they'll save. But if I just had some padding, right, on the inside of that, I actually could do it with margin too if I wanted to. If you look, here's the blue represents the size of the element itself. The green represents the size of its padding. You notice there's no padding specified. Any border is represented by this yellow, and then the margin. So let's demonstrate that a little bit because this is a good use of where either one would work. Padding. So let's specify a padding of 10 pixels. All right. So now I've got this relatively cool border around here. Maybe it needs to be a little bit more. But let's go ahead and also I'm going to give it a margin of 10. Well, I'm going to do 15 pixels, 20 pixels. Okay. So you notice that's pushing me down a little bit. Okay. I'm going to make this a little bigger too, just so we can see things better. And while we're at it, I'll give it a border of 5 pixels solid bed. Oh, looks like I messed up my typing there. Solid. There we go. There we go. All right. So now let's go back to that little box model down there. So there's the element. That's the board container element. It's containing the whole board. Then there's the padding on the element. Okay. So this is the contents of the element. This is the padding on that's inside the element. And here's the border. Okay. So the whole size of the element itself is basically its padding plus its border. Right? But then there's also this margin on the outside. You'll notice the margin is not colored. It just says, I want you to shove away from other things by at least 20 pixels. Make sense? Okay. So we don't need all of that, but I just wanted to be able to go through all of those. And so you can see what works for me here is if I just add some padding, right? I can turn the margin, if I just add some padding of about 20 pixels, I get that nice little border that I'm looking for, right? That kind of makes me look like I've got a checkerboard, that's sitting on the table here. Okay, so that's all well and good, but it's still rolling off the page. Oh, let's go over and make those changes permanent. All right, so add a background image.
I thought it was a square.
Boom. Yes, it's a square. All right, let's see. We needed to make it display inline block. inline block, and we needed to give it some padding of about 20 pixels. And we refresh that. Cool. All right, looks good. Now, I'm pretty happy with that. Don't know why I'm trying to save a web page. But I want to make the size of the board relative to the size of the viewport. Okay, not the size of the document. Okay, so in that case, there are two things that I can do to specify the size, and I actually did the over here. I want to make sure I don't walk. Yeah. So I actually specified it by changing the size of the cells. And if you think about it, when I go look at this, the cells themselves, in fact, if I inspect one of these cells, and then I'm going to go ahead and actually grab the row, you'll notice that the row does have a display of block, but it's only going to go as wide as the div that it's inside. Right? Does that make sense? So because the div that it's inside, the board container is inline block and is shrinking down to the size, it's really the cells themselves, right? These cells that are actually holding, like the whole board is kind of wanting to collapse in on itself. Does that make sense? Like it doesn't have its own width, and it's kind of being inflated by these cells. So if I take these cells and maybe I make them, and I just start to decrease the size, you'll notice the whole board is collapsing down. Okay? All right? So, there is, that looks interesting. Yeah, so they have no width now.
Like we're expanded tic-tac-toe.
So I can specify a size. I could say maybe 100%. Okay. Problem with 100% is it's 100% of whatever container it's inside, which would be the board container. Okay. So maybe that's not good, but maybe I wanted to make it say 10%. Okay. So now it's 10% of the width of the board container. But remember, the board container is going to try to squish it in. The board container doesn't have its own size. So making it a percentage of a thing that's trying to deflate isn't going to really work either, right? But there is this notion of view width, okay? So I've got now it's 10% of the view width, which does inflate me back to where I need to be, okay?
So we're playing
So-
checkers on an inflatable.
On an inflatable, yeah,
With a bouncy house
inflatable
that
board.
goes from
That would
corner to corner.
actually be kind of fun and challenging.
Checkers
You
on
know?
an inflatable board?
Yeah, checkable, like on an inflatable board. Yeah,
Pieces would just keep bouncing.
I know,
No,
I
you
know.
You could do a human
Maybe-
checkers game.
yeah.
And you could
Human-
bounce.
okay.
Like
you could
wizard
bounce
checkers
There
on
we go.
inflatable
You could
moon
be a checker
bounce.
piece and you have to bounce with
Yeah.
it.
All right, so we'll try that maybe as a field trip.
A field trip
Yeah,
to
don't tell your
inflatable
parents I said that.
checkers.
Of course, it's being recorded. All right, so now obviously we don't have square checkers anymore or square cells anymore. So let's make these the height of a cell 10% of the view width. Okay, which is great, but I've got let's look at the viewport I've got right now. Like obviously the width is really wide, and and that doesn't work for me very well. Now, generally speaking, your width is going to be the narrower of your two elements. Okay. In fact, when we do what are called media queries to see like is a person using a mobile device, like are they on a tablet, are they on a phone? When we do, we always just check the width of because the height is really likely to vary. So so it's really kind of better to consider the height, okay, and or to think about the width when we're thinking about things. That's why I started with view width. Let me see if I can figure out what numbers worked really well when I was working on this. Oops, wrong thing. That I played with, yeah, 8 and 11. Okay. Yep. So let's go to board.css and let's change these widths. View 8. This is basically 8% of the view width. And this is another thing when you guys are, just typing numbers in here. Look at all the options. And you're like, wow, there's like a ridiculous number of options I have in here. I don't even know what vmin and vmax even do. Personally, I should go find out. But I'm not going to do that right now. But let's go ahead and refresh our view here. And we end up with a checkerboard that is oddly still loading, even though it's loading off the same computer. All right. Now you'll notice my stones are not exactly in the center of the squares because I need to change the size of the actual checkers. But I've got something, and if I start to bring the size of the board down, right, it moves with it. Okay. Yeah, I definitely, I'm going to have to figure out something to make
Giant checker.
these checkers not explode out the side. But the board is moving the way that we want it to, which is nice. All right, so that should be pretty simple, right? The checkers have margins of 10 pixels, right? Remember we were doing 100 pixels by 100 pixels, so this should all it should all translate very easily, right? If we're I basically had a margin of 10 pixels on a total size of 100, which meant basically 10%, right? So then in this case, I want my margin to be, what did I specify on the checkers? Oh yeah, just specify those as percentages. So these are going to be percentages of the cells. Okay, 10% of the cell, 80% of the cell, right? Does that make sense? So as the cell changes its size based on the viewport, these will change their size based on the size of the cell. Yeah? Tracking me? All right. So let's go see what it does. See if all right. See, you'll notice already the checkers have centered themselves in the board, and now they shrink with the board. Okay, which is kind of nice. Okay, but I still have the problem of going off the bottom of the page. Okay, and that's going to happen on a lot of desktop monitors, right? You're going to have you have these wide layout monitors, and you don't want that situation to occur. Of course, if someone's using this on a mobile device, it almost certainly will look something a lot more like this. Okay, so we've got mobile devices figured out, which is probably more important. Okay, but we do want to handle the people that want to play checkers on their desktops, right? So what we need then is we need a maximum height, right? Don't make the board any bigger than blah. Okay, now how do you figure that out? Okay, by default,
You figure out how big blah is.
blah. You figure out how. Well, you just need to know the aspect ratio of a typical monitor. Anybody have any idea what the aspect ratio of a typical monitor is? Yes.
20 by 1080.
Not the pixel dimensions, but that's helpful because you can use them to figure out the aspect ratio.
16 by 9.
16 by 9. Yep. 16 by 9 is your typical wide screen, right? So 4 by 3 is the old school fat. You guys remember the old school fat TVs? That were real deep and they were almost square. They were 4 by 3. Okay, they were a little wider than they were tall, but they were still 4 by 3. And then the widescreen, more the movie cinematic aspect ratio is 16 by 9. Okay, so you can use 16 by 9 to figure out. So if we just divide, we can figure that the height will be 9, right? Divide that by 16. Okay, we get 56%, right? That's the basic aspect ratio is 56%, and we want to make sure that we never end up going off of the board. So at any point that the width, that it gets so wide that I'm bigger than 56% of the height, then I'm going to start going off.
That was the first thing I thought of when you said 16 by 9.
Oh, yes, a 16 by 9 casserole dish.
Oh.
So,
That's what I thought.
Is there 9 by 16?
No, but it made me think
is
of
there
the
9 by?
thir-
If there's
it made me
16 by
think of the
9,
13
there's
by
also
9
9 by
kid.
16.
But I thought they were usually smaller than that.
Usually it's like 13
No,
by
9 by
That's
9. The square
13
ones.
by 9.
13 by 9.
Yeah.
It's only like 3 inches shy, so we said 16 by 9. Made me think of a 13 by 9
I
casserole
was gonna
dish.
say, I was just sitting there, I'm like, am I dumb? Is my casserole pan the size of my monitor?
So when I said a 16 by 9, you thought of 13 by 9.
I thought the most random stuff in this class.
All right.
Yep.
All right. There you go. So the max height and the max width. All right, we're going to go ahead and set those. And where? Oh, I'm on the wrong. All right. So this is actually easier. I forgot. I started doing it that way with the aspect ratio, and then I realized I don't even need to worry about that. I just, if I just count how many cells I want to have on the page, right? So there's 8, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. There's 8 cells, and then I need some margin for the border and maybe a little bit extra margin. Then I'd say, okay, I don't want it to be any bigger. If I said then 10% of the height, let's just use that as a guess, and we'll kind of go from there. So the maximum width is 10% of the view height. Okay, and the maximum height is also 10% of the view height. All right, save that, refresh it. Okay, and I got a little more margin down here at the bottom than I really want. Okay, all right, but it's still going to work as I get to the point where view, where the width becomes important, then it starts to shrink, right? So, all right, so I can probably do a little more. Anyway, so I fiddled with it and I found it was actually like 11, gives you a good 11% of the view height. So just started with 10. Since there's 8 cells, right? I figured a little extra. And that's kind of how you figure with it. Yep.
Are you part of the Illuminati?
I am part of the Illuminati. Yep.
Is you have a tab open on how to create a person?
Yes. Yes. Yep. That is what I do. I create people
Trying to
just
learn
sometimes.
How to clone.
No. Oh no. We've known how to do that for years. All right. Now, if we
Are
look.
you allowed to share that?
No, because you guys might clone each other, and you guys are also unique and special. I hate for there to be 2 of you. Now notice my my border is really fat relative to my cells now, right? So, and that's because the border is still specified as 20
Okay, so
pixels.
it's sort of slacking off the diet. Don't beat it up too hard.
The border's a little overweight. So,
He's on a diet,
we
he's
just got
hungry.
past Christmas, right? So let's go ahead and specify the padding as something relative to the view width. And say like 1 or maybe 2% of the view width. Let's see what it does.
1, 2, 3.
All right, so maybe a little fatter than we want. I'm not sure. Actually, I think that looks all right.
You're making it feel bad now.
I know. Hey, it's fat with a pH. Let's see what I ended up specifying. Oh, 2%. That's right. I did it as a percentage. It's kind of same thing. Oh yeah, this is actually a very interesting quirk. So first I actually did that. I specified it as part of as a percentage of the viewport. The problem with that is sometimes the viewport is defined by the width and sometimes it's defined by the height, right? When you get to the max height, it's defined by the height. And so if I specified it by the width, by the view width, let me refresh this page. then you'll notice the board, it's shrinking. Even though the cells haven't started shrinking. Now, it's not super noticeable, but I don't like it. I want it to be right? And the same thing with the view height. The view height does, if you specify it as, it definitely gets to be a problem, especially as you get to be way down here where the view height's really big. But if you specify it as a percentage, right, then interestingly, padding you can specify as a percentage of the contents of a cell. So the padding on a cell is a percentage of its of its width, not height, of its width. But the width and height are constrained to each other, and so when I specify it as a percentage of the width, then I end up getting exactly the behavior that I'm looking for, which is that it doesn't shrink at all until I start shrinking the whole board. Okay, so I picked 2% because I thought maybe a little bit fatter looked better. Fat with a pH. Not to
Being
be
a little
offensive.
bit overweight is better than being a little bit.
No. It's fat with pH, right? So
I don't think anyone here gets that.
yes, you guys get it. You can
What
you
is
go look
fat
that up.
pH?
What is it?
Oh, that's old school. It was the good version of fat. Like, oh, that's fat, but in a good way.
Like fat beats.
Like
They
fat
look cool.
beats or
They look
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, like man, those are some fat jeans.
That definition is excellent.
There you go. Excellent. So
I
it
can
looks.
call you fat now.
It looks. You can. You can.
Oh, did you want to know what Vmin and Vmax are for?
What are Vmin and Vmax for?
So that's actually, it would be super useful for media queries because Vmin is the measure of the smallest side rather than a specific side, and Vmax is measure of the largest side. So you can use that to determine if you're doing a media query, you can find out that regardless of whether they're doing portrait or landscape.
Yeah.
We'll find.
Well, how about that? Because then I could just do this as 8% of the Vmin, right? This should work. I could probably do it as 11% of the Vmin. And I could probably get rid of these then. And let's see what happens. Whoa! Okay. We'll just go back to what I had before. But that's something to play with to see if it might be a happiness. But right at this moment, it's not being friendly. So there we go. We have a board.
Well, I thought you were calling it fat.
Fat, excellently fat. All right. So now we've got a board that is responsive, and it will look nice no matter how big our browser window
So
is.
it's not unconscious.
So, what's that?
It's not unconscious.
It's not unconscious. All right. So I don't know where that just went to. All right. So now we've got that, which is nice. And let's go ahead and work on this. Let's get rid of this. All right. Okay. So we'll commit that later. It is 12:34. Everybody tracking so far? Okay. Pretty cool. Looks nice. A lot nicer than it did the other day, right? All right. Hey, does anybody before we move on, because we have 25 minutes left in class, but I want to know if anybody has a checkerboard they want to show everybody. Does anybody have one that they really like? I see Luke nodding his head. That's why I thought about it, because I might have spoken with your dad yesterday at church. So go ahead and present to the class if you would like to display your checkerboard. Anybody else have a checkerboard they'd like to show off? Did everybody get a chance to at least finish the assignments? Yeah.
I didn't finish
Yeah, I
Flexbox
finished.
Froggy. I'm stuck on level 14.
You're stuck on level 14
Not
Flexbox
yet.
Froggy.
I'll-
Okay.
I'll help you with
I'm
that. I
stuck
didn't see
on
your email
24
until
and I
late
can't
last
figure it
night.
out.
Okay.
I'm about to throw it away.
What is it?
24.
Yeah, 24 is tough. 24 is tough.
I kind of like did the background image stuff, but it wouldn't work. It wouldn't go through.
my laptop.
It wouldn't go through.
Yes.
Didn't do that.
Okay, well, we'll have to take a look at that. All right, go ahead. Are you presenting?
Oh, yeah.
All right, let me go back to. No, that's the wrong one. This one. Here we go. Bigger.
Bigger is better.
Luke
Everything's better
is
in text.
presenting.
Everything's bigger in text.
All right. Show us.
Wait, is that working?
No, I don't see.
That's weird.
Are you presenting just your window or?
Okay, let me see now. That's weird. Okay, I'm gonna stop presenting to refresh it.
Yeah.
Should I do it my entire screen?
Yeah, your entire screen.
Should I hit this or
Yep.
just share?
Hit share.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
And then go to the other one. Whoa!
There we
Oh,
go.
wow.
Whoa.
So we've got
That's cool.
Captain America. Is Captain America the piece? Oh, okay.
No,
He's the-
yeah, he's the cell.
He's the Cell and Thanos.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sweet. And are those Infinity Stones?
They're ghost stones.
But what about the bottom? The brown ones?
No, they're like gold.
That would be awesome if you use Infinity Stones.
Mm-hmm.
That would be pretty
Yeah,
sweet.
yeah.
So, definitely digging that. I wouldn't mind playing some checkers with Infinity Stones. However, I've heard if a human picks up an Infinity Stone, it pretty much blows you up. So, might be a dangerous and short game of checkers. But
Well, maybe we could talk to Doctor Strange, learn how to do stuff, and then we wouldn't actually have to grab it. We could just move it around.
right.
Or Scarlet Witch.
Or what's his name? Star-Lord, right? Whose dad
Right.
happens to be a living planet.
Yeah, but
So-
Kinda.
he's not.
Was.
He doesn't have
Now
his powers anymore.
He disintegrates.
Yeah.
he
He
blew his
doesn't
brain up,
necessarily
so-
die.
Well, he blew his brain up. The
No, I'm
cell,
talking about
so.
Star-Lord.
Oh, that's true.
Star-Lord is kind of.
All right,
Oh, yeah,
so
Ego literally died.
back to checkers.
Yeah.
I'm digging
We were
your.
talking about checkers.
I know.
We were talking about playing checkers.
Now, when we get to chess, I would love to see like
I'm gonna
themed
go
out
ahead.
chessboards where you've got like characters from whatever,
Oh, that would
If
be
You know,
y'all can make a chessboard where
Avengers,
each
Harry Potter,
individual
Lord of the
piece
Rings,
with sound effects.
Yeah,
With sound effects.
with sound
Every
effects,
piece has to have a separate sound effect.
right? That wouldn't be annoying. All right. So let's what is that? Lord of the Rings.
Chess.
Oh, that's pretty sweet.
Can you present it?
That looks expensive too.
Mm.
Ours will be cheaper because it's free. All right, so let's talk. Actually, you know what? I think we can wrap up there for now. I'm going to introduce string interpolation very briefly, and then, but we're not going to go into exactly what it is. As with anything, let me go back to present here. The smartest thing you can do is Google it, right? So you can Google JavaScript string interpolation, but another thing that you can Google is JavaScript string templates, okay? And what we're going to be trying to, the problem that we're trying to solve is actually when we look in WebStorm and I go into board HTML, I see all this like really repetitive code, right? So we're going to use some looping so that we don't have to write all of that. Obviously, we just cut and pasted it over and over again, but then even cutting and pasting creates the opportunity for errors, okay, and things like that.
What if you cut the wrong line?
Exactly.
Cut the wrong line.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you
Right?
have to-
Or if you ran out of paste, or if
Then
you
have to
started
tape
eating your
it
paste,
together.
right? As I'm sure some of you guys probably ate your paste in kindergarten. All right, so no cutting and pasting. So what we're going to do is we're going to use excuse me, a JavaScript mechanism called a template string, and they go like, well, actually, I'll just show you in here. Let's say that I'm writing here, and I just say, you know what, I'm going to drop the script right here, like it's hot,
But too hard, it might break.
and
How
then
are you dropping it?
You might burn something if it's hot.
I'm going to say console.log. All right, and this is what string literals are delimited with these backticks. Okay, it's just below your escape key, above your tab key on most computers, and then you can type some stuff in, right? But if you had a variable over here, like yummy food, what should we put in this variable called yummy food?
I wonder what.
Bacon, right? All right, so, and
At
then
some
we
point,
put,
we should totally get a biscuit to go with that bacon.
Right?
Instead of eggs.
We already have
Just to
sloth
change
casserole.
things up.
We already have sloth casserole.
all right, so
Ooh.
let's go ahead
Sloth bacon, not sloth cow.
I actually
and,
saw a
all
bunch of sloth memes this morning.
right, let's refresh
Oh,
this.
one of these.
All right, so take a look at this, what I have here. Okay, it says, you know, some stuff in and bacon, okay, which is pretty handy. Okay, so what that means is, well, there's a couple of things that are really nice about this, and one is that I can go,
Bacon.
I'm allowed, yeah, one is that it's bacon. More stuff.
Even
Right?
more stuff in.
Now notice, you see how it's like it's maintaining its formatting, right? It's all inside one string, but I'm formatting with white space. I'm not having to like, you know, and I've got this multi-line string. Now, what if I did
What if it was
this?
stuffing instead of stuff? And then it could be like
Right.
Thanksgiving.
Some stuffing in, some stuffing. There you go. And it's bacon stuffing, right? Because you could stuff your bacon.
How?
Wait, how does bacon get
How do you
stuffed?
stuff
Bacon's like
bacon?
an
You
elevator
You use
pitch.
2 slices of bacon,
Literally, it's
obviously.
It's like
What are you thinking?
Wouldn't
Like
that be
bacon
more
and
like a bacon
jalapenos.
sandwich?
All right, so
pretty much,
now let's go ahead and now see. Look at that. I've got perfectly formatted HTML that is all inside that string literal. Okay, so it would be relatively easy for me to loop then. Okay, over that to do things like to put each cell, right? To change to use counters so that I can change the cell IDs and things like that. So that will be a project for you guys to give a try between now and Thursday if you want. But I want to take the remaining 10 minutes to see
Which Thursday were you referring to?
the very next one on the calendar.
Year from now.
Which is
So
in
because we're gonna be looking at
20 days.
string literals on Thursday, okay, and we're gonna go ahead and we'll get rid of all of this. We're actually we'll put our string literals, our templates, into their own JavaScript file, so it'll be easier to kind of see where the HTML is, because it's at that point your JavaScript it's like this hybrid between HTML and JavaScript, right? Because you have JavaScript that's creating HTML. So we're going to keep that in a separate file, so it's a little easier to manage. Okay. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and kill the feed, and then if you guys,
But people might be hungry still.
well, people might be hungry.
Please
Yeah.
don't kill it, please.
All right. So